Hi, everyone. This is Mathieu, and I am very honored today to share the screen with my special friend, Christi. And Christi is here to share her healing story. And one of the things I'm excited about this interview with is I want to interview more people who they're not at the end of their journey, they're somewhere in the middle of their journey. And I think for those of us who have been chronically ill for a long time, hearing somebody who's in the middle of their journey can be a really helpful thing. So with that said, welcome, Christi. Thanks for helping out with this interview.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So it's worth saying, Christi and I got to know each other on Instagram. There is a handful of us now that all kind of know each other because we're somewhere in the stage of, or somewhere in our own journey of healing from oxalate overload. And I'm one of those people, and Christi's one of those people, and we got a group of others out there, and we're really being supportive of each other. And so with that said, Christi, why don't you share a little bit about the history of your health journey? When it started, when you really noticed it retrospectively, what it looked like, and what's your diet like been over those times?
Sure. So I would say my health really broke at 30, and making me emotional.
Yeah, it's welcome here.
I had I don't know. I did hair for many years, and I loved to smoke cigarettes, and I loved to party and drink, and I ate a lot of junk food doing hair, and we'd be busy all day. We'd order a pizza, you'd eat one pizza all day, and you'd try to sneak out and have a cigarette, and at night you'd go party with your friends. So that was probably a good 10 or 15 years of my, not quite 15, but probably a good 10 years of my life, kind of leading up from the time I was 18, graduated high school, went into hair school, and then kind of working in the hair field. And so I, had kind of already probably set myself up to increase my toxicity over that period of time. And then, I got married, and I had my first son, Sebastian, who I had with a C-section, and everything was fine, healed up fine. And then it was really with Dylan when I was 30, I had a second C-section, and I left the hospital very sick from that C-section. And that's really where at 30, where my healing journey started. And then, kind of in retrospect, looking back, I remember at 9, I was diagnosed with 9% short-term memory. So my mom homeschooled, I have 3 sisters. So my mom homeschooled all of us, and I was 9, and I still wasn't able to read. I couldn't even read a 3-letter word. I would sound it out. And every time I came to that same word on the next page, it was like starting over. So my mom finally had a bunch of testing done, and they realized that I wasn't retaining the information and that I had 9% short-term memory. So I did a lot of therapy and stuff to help open up new brain passageways so that I could learn to read, which I did. But I remember being a kid, and there was a period of time where my knee hurt, like my one knee would hurt, and I'd lay in bed at night thinking maybe I had cancer or something. And then I had 9% short-term memory. And then as I got older, I remember I'd get this weird sensation in my legs. It was probably around the time Sebastian. So Sebastian's 10 now. So he was about a year, where like my legs would just get really weak on me. So I'd kind of bend down to do something. When I'd stand up, it felt like my legs were going to go out, but they never did. And I'd lay down sometimes at night, and I'd have this shooting pain in the center of my spine, which was like really uncomfortable. And so and also, like I said, I smoked, and we partied a lot and drank and had a good old time, ate junk food and French fries and burgers and all those great things. So my mom, I feel like as we were kids, definitely probably tried to feed us healthier, but we still ate a lot of potatoes, probably a lot of high oxalate foods coming from like some Italian background and then Irish. So anyways, I went in for surgery at 30 for my second C-section with Dylan, and it didn't go well at all. In fact, the epidural wasn't working, so I could almost feel everything the entire surgery. And then there was blood in my catheter, so they couldn't give me any more epidural, so they started pumping me with Dilaudid. And I don't do well on painkillers, but they had given me so much painkiller that it knocked me out. And Dylan was born at 9 a.m. and I couldn't even hold him till like almost 3 o'clock in the afternoon because I was so out of it. So then
Wow.
I finally came to, and I was able to take care of Dylan, and I started getting this low-grade fever and very bad body aches while I was in the hospital. And they keep you there for about four days after a C-section. And so I thought, well, maybe my milk's going to be coming in and I'm just achy and fevery because I'm, going to be breastfeeding and all of this stuff. But it didn't go away. So I get home at Christmas. Dylan's birthday is coming up next week. So he was born on the 15th. So I get home from the hospital and I'm in so much pain. I went through, with my first C-section, I didn't even take ibuprofen. I never needed painkillers. I was up and going. With this second C-section, I went through a whole bottle of over 60 ibuprofen, and they were like mega strength in just a couple of weeks because I had such severe body aches that I couldn't function. So anyways, a period of time went by. I'm getting these really weird fevers at night where it's about a 12 to 24 hours. I'm sweating, my heart's racing. I, get a low grade fever. I feel like I have the flu, and then bam, it's gone. And so I knew something got unleashed in my system. So that started me on a journey to see maybe I have Lyme disease, where I don't know what's going on. And of course I got blown off. And then a few months into that, I did get a diagnosis. I never tested positive for Lyme disease, but I did have a very, very low CD57 white blood cell count. It was like 30 and it should have been 200. And so they said, well, you've got Lyme disease because that's, 99% linked to Lyme. So that kind of really started me on a journey of trying to figure out how to heal my body without being on antibiotics for 5 years. So.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of people don't know, I think that, do you know how long you're on antibiotics with the C-section?
Well, I never did antibiotics with the C-section actually. So
I thought that was standard protocol.
well, you know what, it might have been actually. I don't know. I think it may have just been while I was in surgery because I don't remember having to take anything afterwards.
Okay.
I don't think, but it's been almost 7 years, so I'm a little fuzzy.
Yep. And how long were you in the hospital with the second birth?
4 days. And
Okay.
then they discharged me. And I told them, I said, I'm really not feeling good. I'm having these body aches that really hurt. And I said, I've got like a fever. And they're like, well, it's probably just your breast milk coming in, but it just never went away.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So then so you got the information about your low white blood cell count.
Very low.
What did you end up pursuing and how did things proceed after that?
So initially, I actually had found a friend of mine had recommended this primary care doctor because a lot of doctors don't want to talk about Lyme disease, but she was willing to do the tests on me, and she kind of knew other tests that she could run besides just like a Western blot, which will say, yes, you have this, or no, you don't have this, or do you have these co-infections? So after I got that, she's like, well, you have Lyme disease. I'm like, great. And I knew people because I come from, I'm from Loudoun County. On the East Coast in Virginia.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's my home.
Lyme County?
Loudoun County.
Oh God, I thought you said, because there's a Lyme, Connecticut. For some reason, I thought you said
Loudoun County. And Loudoun
County
County has very high rates of Lyme for
Okay.
whatever reason. So I knew people that had Lyme, that had been through treatment for Lyme, that were still suffering from Lyme, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, so she goes, we're going to get you on doxycycline. I think she put me on, and an antiviral. And so I started taking that, and I was getting worse. Like my joints, my arms, my elbows would just start to swell to the point. And at that time I was doing hair. So I was working behind the chair doing people's hair. And like my whole knee would swell to the point where I could barely walk or move. And it was excruciating. Like I can't even tell you how painful it was. And that started happening, and it almost like I had like gout-like attacks. And that was when I was on antibiotics and antivirals. So I started doing some research at that point because I was like, I'm not getting better. I also had decided I wanted to see a Lyme literate doctor in DC. So I started doing my own research. I'm trying to read up on what other people are doing, blah, blah, blah. And I go see a Lyme literate doctor in DC. And she's like, well, you're going to do 3 years of antibiotics. you definitely have Lyme disease. You've probably had it for over 15 years and it just kind of laid dormant. And then something happened and it triggered it, which it obviously I hadn't been taking care of myself either. So I'm not surprised. And I said, okay. So I went home and honestly, I went to bed that night and I started having nightmares about going on long-term antibiotics to the point of waking me up. And 2 days later, I said to my husband, I said, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing 3 years of antibiotics. I don't have a good feeling about it. And that's when I kind of started, I got off everything at that point. I stopped taking everything. And I said, okay, I have 3 problems. I've got a messed up gut, I'm toxic, and I need to get nutrition into my life. And those are my big issues. And Sally talks about that too. Like your biggest issues with chronic disease is toxicity and lack of nutrition. And I think that's probably right. So from that point on, I moved sort of the Weston A. Price diet. One of the first things I did was did a 3-month raw milk fast. And then,
Wow.
yep, I worked, which I oxalate dumping actually now looking back on that, because I was doing that raw milk fast. I was detoxing or herxing, or I think oxalate dumping now, like so bad, like hardly functional. And then I moved into Weston A. Price. I started seeing a chiropractor, doing tons of supplements. And I was doing better. And then I started taking very high doses of vitamin C, which I wish I hadn't, but in some ways I think it may have helped some of at the time. Because when I started taking that, I would have that reoccurring fever that would come on for like every 12 hours. And I started taking really high doses of vitamin C. And within about 2 months, I had that come out one night. I sweat and sweat and sweat, and it never came back. That was the last time. So I don't necessarily recommend vitamin C. I think at that time it may have helped with some of the infections.
How big of a dose were you doing?
Oh gosh, bowel tolerance. And I was, anywhere from probably 10 to 100 grams, whatever I could get in me that I could tolerate. And
you could get 100 grams in you some days?
Some days, and not poop my pants.
Yeah.
And then I was taking the Lipo-C too, the gel.
Sure. Yeah.
And I did that for almost 2 years because I was convinced that I needed to. And I'm not saying, I don't know. I don't know. So yeah, so I started taking Juice Plus, which are those little like veggie supplement things. I started taking Standard Process with a muscle testing natural response chiropractor. And I was taking high doses of vitamin C, and I cleaned my diet up, but I was still doing some very high oxalate stuff, obviously, with food.
Which were what then?
Well, we were doing rhubarb, and I was still doing a lot of potatoes and some spinach smoothies and green smoothies and chocolate smoothies. So I had things that got better, Michael, like in all honesty, like, okay, so I had Dylan, I was very sick. Then I started the raw milk, some Weston A. Price, Juice Plus, Standard Process, muscle testing, and very high doses of vitamin C. And that I did for 2 years after Dylan was born. And I had stuff that did go away. Yeah. So like my joints stopped swelling, the pain went away. The biggest thing that I struggled with was heart palpitations, and those never went away.
You still have those now?
They're getting better, honestly. I honestly really have a feeling that it's oxalate.
Yep.
I think for me, and I think I had Lyme disease. I think I had a much worse oxalate problem, to be quite honest with you.
Yep. Okay. So then, 2 years on this high vitamin C Standard Process program. Yep. What happens next?
And I got better, but I wasn't better the way I wanted to be better. Right. Yeah. So my heart was still going crazy. And I would go talk to my muscle testing doctor, and she was like, there's nothing wrong with your heart. And I was on every supplement I could be on. Like I was on magnesium, calcium, this and that. I mean, handfuls of supplements, juice, and different things like that. And she's like, there's nothing wrong with your heart. I'm like, my heart is palpitating. Like, and I have lived with heart palpitations since Dylan was born every day, on and off throughout the day for almost 7 years. but they are finally, I'm noticing they are getting less intense.
Yep.
And I can tell that they're lessening over time since I've been carnivore. So it was the heart palpitations that really, like, okay, these things have gotten better, but I'm still dealing with this and I don't know how to get better from these heart palpitations. And I didn't want to go to a cardiologist. I didn't want to get on heart medication. I was like, I'm not doing it. And that's kind of what led me into looking into carnivore back in 2018, because I heard about Michaela Peterson's story and how she went into remission from all these severe autoimmune issues. And I'm like, well, if carnivore is not going to get my heart healthy, then I don't know what is.
So for your heart palpitations, what did that look like for you?
It was awful. I mean, it caused severe anxiety because you feel like you're going to have a heart attack. Oh, I'm sorry.
Would you have random bouts of rapid heart rate, or how did it show up for you?
Not so much. It was just a constant like thudding in my chest. Like it was, the beat was off, like, and it was like that all the time. I mean, for years, like, and I don't even know, like now I'm thinking like, how did I push through that? Cause I was stubborn, but it was just like, an irregular heartbeat. It wasn't a speeding, racing heartbeat, which I've had here. And I think that for me comes more when I'm oxalate dumping. Sometimes my heart will rev up a little bit, but this was like where the beat is off. Like you can feel it in your chest and it'll beat normal. And then it boom, beats weird. And then beats normal, beats weird.
Got it. Okay. Yep. I just asked because I'm curious of one of the symptoms I've had along the way is it often will happen at night when I'm sitting in bed, and the way I imagine in my head, it's almost like the blood's able to go backwards, which I think they call regurgitation. And I won't pretend I know all my medical words. So forgive me if I got that wrong, but that it just would be like, and
does it feel like it's your
heart? Huh?
Does it feel like it's your heart?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and it's bigger, so it's loud enough so I can feel it in my chest, but it just feels wrong. So I don't know if it's an extra beat or a missed beat or there is a valve's not working right, but something feels really off. And sometimes it'll happen in the night and I'll feel it for a few minutes and then it goes away. Yeah. In my case. So that's why I was just curious how it was showing up for you.
Mine was all the time and all the time. Yeah. I do honestly believe that it's healing. And now I'm looking back and I'm thinking, I really feel like it's very possible that I could have had oxalate like built up in my heart. I'm thinking, I honestly think that's possible.
Yeah. And another possibility for some people watching is that vitamin B1 can get really messed up in people with oxalate poisoning, with other types of issues. High carbohydrate can deplete B1, and that can show up. They call that wet berry, where you have cardiovascular problems, and arrhythmias can be a part of that.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure I was deficient too, probably in things, because I know alcohol depletes, and I wasn't like a raging alcoholic, but we drank very regularly. I haven't drank in forever. But I mean, alcohol depletes your B vitamins too. I know, I've read a lot too. Yeah.
Yep, for sure. Yeah. So, okay. So now we're at, you've gone, you shifted into carnivore. How's the story proceed from there?
So so it was interesting because
that was 4 years ago now. That was in 18.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And I was still taking Juice Plus and I was still taking all my standard cross supplements. So I started on Carnivore and I went to my muscle testing doctor, and she was basically like, well, first of all, I asked her to muscle test me for Juice Plus, and she said I was not responding well to it. So I stopped taking all that juice. And then she told me, so I only did it for 3 months, and I was started to have some weird symptoms like the tingling, like, you know, when oxalate moves, sometimes you get tingling. So I was having a little bit of oxalate dumping when I went carnivore, and I didn't notice anything huge from doing it because I only did it 3 months. And then I went to my muscle testing doctor, my muscle natural response testing doctor, and she was basically like, well, you're all over the place. You need to get back on like green vegetables, spinach. So I'm like, okay. So I did. I got back on eating spinach and putting that in my smoothies and all that kind of stuff. And then heart palpitations. And then we actually, in 2019, that summer, we moved. So everything just stayed the same. Nothing really changed. I just kind of continued eating, taking my standard processed supplements. I got back off carnivore because she said I needed green vegetables. So I did that. And then we moved out to Colorado summer of 2019.
Were you still keeping it low carb at that point? Just
Yeah,
added in
but I did, but I also kind of fell off the wagon, especially when we were moving and coming out here. I kind of started to eat junk food again a little bit. And you know, and then I kind of fell off the wagon and me into carnivore actually. But and then we driving out here, I mean, pizza. At one point I was eating donuts again. And so there was a 3 or 4 month period of time where I was not as tight. And I started, at that point, I started to get really severe itchy skin. My heart palpitations started to pick back up again. And my heart palpitations started to pick back up. And there was a third thing that I started to have again. Heart palpitations, itchy skin. Oh, and my legs would hurt really bad around my knees. Like they would just start to ache super bad. And so I was like, I really got to think about this carnivore thing. I'm in Colorado now. I'm done taking all these supplements. I've spent so much money and I only got so far. Like, I think I'm going to give this carnivore thing a try. So that led me into carnivore in September of 2019.
Oh, yeah, I was August of 2019 is when I started.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're on the same timeline.
Yeah, we're a little over 3 years now, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Of course, I was an idiot and I still kept doing 8 grams of vitamin C until December of that year. So I think I'm officially 3 years low oxalate now.
Are you? Yeah. Well, and I feel like it's easy to like get like hooked on stuff and you get nervous to get off of it. It's like if I remember having anxiety coming off vitamin C, but I had gotten sick of taking it and my teeth were sensitive. And I just was like, but what if I cut, like everything comes back and this is keeping everything at bay? But honestly, that stuff didn't come back.
Yeah. Okay. So carnivore.
So carnivore starts. So I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm like, I should transition really well this time to carnivore because the first time I did it in that period in 2018, I was having weird stuff happen a little bit, not quite to the extent the second time, but a little bit. So I'm like, I've detoxed. Like I'm thinking I'll have a nice smooth transition on carnivore. Like, so I start carnivore in September of 2018 and within 2 weeks, all hell breaks loose.
Yeah. And did you know what oxalates were at this point?
I had never even heard the word.
Yeah.
Never heard the word. I had no idea until weird stuff started happening and stuff that I never had with Lyme disease. I mean, this was all a whole new ball of wax.
Yeah.
And except for the fact that when I did that raw milk fast, many moons, back in the early days of recovering from Lyme, I was having severe vertigo. And that started happening again when I went carnivore.
Nice.
And I was like, now looking back, I thought maybe it was candida dying off at that time. Now looking back, I'm like, I was oxalate dumping, like hardcore. And so anyways, so I start carnivore and 2 weeks in, I start having severe vertigo episodes. My heart starts going crazy. And that was real bad for a while, actually, with like 6 months. And then I started having chronic. Okay, so with all of this said, I never had gut issues. I never had diarrhea. I never had gas. I never had any of that stuff. I always had a very regular number 2. So I start carnivore, and very shortly into carnivore, I start having chronic diarrhea. Chronic. And I'm not trying to talk bad about carnivore or anything like that. I'm just talking about the experiences that I had and what led me to figure out that there was an oxalate component, at least in my situation.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah. And they were sandy colored, and it was 5 times a day, and it didn't let up regardless of what I ate. So diarrhea, I started having severe vertigo episodes. My heart was going nuts. And then, I mean, it just weird stuff was happening.
So let me stop you for a second.
Yeah.
So you were having some, and that was going on for even 6 months. You were having really nasty symptoms.
Oh, I mean, still I get them.
Okay, but what at the 6-month point and before you knew about oxalates, what kept you going? Because a lot of people would have stopped and been like, this carnivore thing isn't for me.
Because, and this is going to sound really weird, okay, but when I started this whole process in 2017, and I was so sick, and I didn't know what to do, and I got on my knees that night and I prayed, and I said, God, I said, I don't know what to do, but you do, and you're going to have to take me each step of the way. And God has really answered my prayer. And the same thing happened when I moved out here, and I was in my kitchen, and I was so sick of having heart palpitations. My skin was itching, and I was still having that leg pain. And those were like the 3 things that just would not go away. And I was standing at my counter in my kitchen, and I said, Lord Jesus, I don't know what to do. And I'm telling you clear as day, he said, I'm dead serious, get back on carnivore. Just like that. And I started, and I've never gotten off since, even with everything. And so I knew that whatever was going on, I think it helped me because I had dealt with the herxing from Lyme disease, and I understood that there is a process sometimes where you get sicker before you get better. Yep. And sometimes there's just no other way around it.
You got to go through it at some point.
And I think that that was my case. So I pushed through it. And then what really got me looking into that, well, at first I thought it was just like the adaptation symptoms. But what really got me digging was when I started getting air hunger. And that's like a common oxalate dumping symptom. And it's not that you're not getting air, and it's not that you're not getting oxygen, but it's like you can't get a deep breath. And I woke up 4 months into carnivore. I woke up and I could not get a deep breath. And I had never in my entire life, Michael, had lung problems. I'd never had asthma. I never had pneumonia, never had chronic lung infections, never. And I wake up and I can't get a deep breath. And I'm like, what in the hell is this? What is this? I never had it with Lyme disease, nothing. And that's when I started digging. I'm like, what is this air hunger? And I come across this YouTube video. I don't know at what point that was after the air hunger started. And the girl is going through oxalate dumping symptoms, and she talks about air hunger. And that's when I found the Triangle Oxalate group, and I started digging, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm oxalate dumping. And what the hell is that?
But the video you watched, she knew it was oxalate dumping?
She had read like Susan Owens and Sally Norton's work, and she was oxalate dumping. And she just did this little, I don't know how I came across it, but she was this cute little Asian girl, and she did this little YouTube video and was talking about her oxalate dumping symptoms and kind of put them in this video. And one of them was air hunger, because I take my oxygen, and my oxygen's at 98 at high altitude. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I can't feel like I can't get this breath, you know? And it was very bad the first year. I mean, I'd wake up in the middle of the night gasping for air. And it's gradually gotten better, but I'm like, sure, I had oxalate built up all in here. I'm sure. So that's what got me digging, and that's what led me to oxalate. And had it not been for carnivore, I wouldn't have known about oxalate. And I think that's also why I had all those, I think that's where my heart stuff was coming from too.
Yeah, makes sense. Totally makes sense.
Yeah.
And Sally talks about it, and anyone who knows anatomy knows that oxalates are going to get absorbed through the gut into the hepatic portal vein, hepatic portal vascular system, that such an amazing design. It takes things right to the liver, so the liver can deal with things right then and there before it gets into the rest of the system. But the next place it goes is straight up, and there's the heart and there's the lungs. So yeah.
And I will say that most of my oxidant, you can see so many people are affected differently by oxalate. I read in the Triangle Oxalate group, and some people are bedridden with pain. It's joint stuff. For me, so much of my oxalate dumping has been air hunger. It's been the ears. It's been my mouth. It's been my brain. It's been it's like gut stuff. Like, I feel like I must have had so much built up, like, in this part of my body, because it seems to be where all my dumping symptoms like congregate, is like from like my crotch up, like all that area seems to have been affected by oxalate. Yeah. The heart stuff, the air hunger, I don't know. It does for me.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But it's getting better. Slowly.
Yeah.
But slowly.
So is there much to fill in the next couple of years up till now?
So yeah, so now, thankfully I was never bedridden with oxalate dumping, but I've been oxalate dumping every day since I started Carnivore. I would say 6 months, I feel like I noticed that my symptoms decrease, and that I'm having days now where I'm feeling better and even euphoric some days. But I would say I'm more in a stage now where I'm clearing oxalate daily. I'm not always dumping, but I can easily trigger a dump if I'm not careful. Yeah. And I'm seeing things heal. I have no cravings for nicotine anymore. I have no cravings for alcohol. I had a sunspot fall off my cheek. My weight has varied on Carnivore. I was real thin when I started, and then at about 1.5 years, I started putting on weight, and I've maintained. So I don't know, like about probably 15 pounds. I don't know if that's a healing thing, but I just haven't even worried about that.
So yeah. Do you mean are you saying you're a little overweight for your ideal, or you're at a good weight because you were thin?
Well, I liked where I was when I was thin. I was about 120, okay. And I'm guessing I've probably put on between 15 and 20 pounds, even though I don't weigh my. So, yeah. But I'm okay with that. I'm okay with a little thicker. I feel like maybe my body just needs that right now.
Yep. Well, that's a story I've heard a lot. You probably have as well in testimonials of It's not unusual for people to put on extra what would be ideal, and then hang out there, and then all of a sudden it just falls off at some point.
And it's just a healing thing. It's just healing.
That's what I'm hearing. Yeah. Even my nutrition teacher, Mary Ruddock, who's was really sick at one point, she said, I think she was like 60, 80 pounds overweight for about 1 year.
Really?
And then as her body healed, the weight, she just normalized. Yeah. So, yeah. And my partner right now, it's amazing when I look at what she eats. It's so small. She's mostly carnivore, but she loves her lettuce, and and a few little things here and there. And it's like she gained weight when she really went more animal based, but her body's working things out. And in her case, she finally got something that was like super concrete. And her brother's a dentist in the Springs, actually. And compared last year's pictures to this year's pictures just a month ago, and she is regrowing her gums. She had receding gums. So it's really exciting for me, for her to have something that's so concrete like that. Yeah. As opposed to, I'm getting all these weird symptoms. Am I healing, or is my body just
just dying?
Yeah, exactly.
I have thought that a few times. I'm like, am I just no.
Well, and that's why it's so important to me. I've interviewed 2 people a couple of years ago, but I've already got a couple other people lined up to interview. And for me, having these success stories, these healing stories out there, it just feels so important, because for the last 3 years or longer, the stories that I found out there, they keep me going, because I've personally gone through really rough times.
Me
And
too.
I'm finally starting to see some glimmers of hope and light. But yeah, but these success stories more than anything, I think, have kept me going. So
Oh
so
yeah.
that's why I just want to keep getting more and more people's stories out there.
Yeah, and it's really, I mean, I love listening to people that have like are in a place of in their healing journey where they're no longer symptomatic. But at the same time, it's hard when when your situation is taking longer. And I feel like it is encouraging, it's like sometimes when I get discouraged or I'm feeling like, gosh, what in the world? I always go back to the fact like you had a sunspot fall off your face.
Yeah.
You have no cravings for alcohol, junk food, nicotine
Yeah.
anymore. Like that was just done. And then, I mean, my joints are doing well. I haven't had any more swelling in those. So yeah, I've got oxalate dumping symptoms, but I'm also seeing things get better. And I feel like once I have enough of that out of my body, then it'll be really great,
Have you now a lot of people in the oxalate world that understand it and how to work and manage it, they'll often add in small amounts of oxalates to try to control the dumping. And I'm wondering, did you experiment with that at all? Did it work, not work?
One time I did. And it was actually over this past summer. I was feeling a lot better. The first, like I got to, I don't know, it must have been about 2 years and so many months in. And I all of a sudden noticed like a real shift in my dumping. Like it was manageable. And I'm like, gosh, I feel like I can want to get up and get myself ready and do stuff. Even though I'm still having some stuff, it's not nearly as unbearable as it had been at certain points. And so I was feeling like that for probably about 2 months. And so I thought, wow, I think maybe I'm through some of this. So then I decided I was going to start doing the chiropractor again. And that was an awful idea because I started going twice a week and I did that for about 5 weeks and it threw me into a dump from hell that went on the entire summer. And it was really bad. And gosh, where was I going with that? Oh, and there was one point in that dump where I was like, I have got to try some oxalate because I feel like I want to die. And I did, and it didn't do anything.
What did you try?
I tried tea. And I was like sitting there and I'm like, nothing. And so I heard a few of the people say once you get far enough along in the process, like it doesn't really help to add oxalate because the body is so efficient at moving it out that it just it doesn't care. And so
it doesn't care how you feel anymore.
It doesn't care that you just gave it some oxalate. It's like, no,
Yeah.
We're on a mission, like we're far enough along now. So that's the only time I've really tried to add in oxalate. I mean, I've probably had some pepper on a burger before or something like that, but my oxalate content is pretty much 0.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily recommend that either. Like if somebody is really oxalate toxic, I don't know that what I did was the wisest thing either,
For some people, it seems to work great. I'm in a similar camp as you. I tried, if I do like a quarter cup of sweet potato or, if I do a cup of tea and I think I even tried chaga tea for a while and it's like, I can't tell it's helping at all.
No.
So I just kind of pretty much have given up on it.
Yeah.
But that said, for people who might be new here, for some people, that cup or 2 cups of tea, for some people, it can turn it off. So it's always something worth exploring.
Yep.
Okay, I wanted to ask you, so taking oxalates didn't work. Have you found any supplements or even foods along in the carnivore world, in the animal-based, have you found anything that's helped, Epsom salt baths or anything that's helped modulate things?
Well, I do dairy. I do eat dairy, I should say. And back in April, I started drinking whole milk, and I drink a fair amount of that actually every day. And I do that for the calcium and for the B vitamins. But I can tell you that ever since I went carnivore and I started oxalate dumping, anything that I try to do to my body to make it better makes my dumping worse. Even at this point, I recently tried Sally's like gold drink that she has. that's supposed to help with dumping. And within 30 minutes of drinking that, that whole day I was dumping severe. And
Wow.
it made me dump. And then I just recently ordered colostrum because I was like, well, I'm doing milk, like I could probably add a little colostrum in. And within 30 minutes of doing colostrum, I was in a dump from hell. And so for me at this point, and I don't think it's permanent, I just feel like my body is efficient now. So anytime I give it a little boost, it's ready to just like start pushing it out faster. So I really don't do anything extra. And I'm not saying that's a good thing either. I just I cannot tolerate that stuff. I used to be able to take supplements. Once I started carnivore, once I started dumping, it's like the whole thing, it just changed. I can't do them. It just makes me dump too bad. So no, I'm not. So just whole milk, and I do eggs and bacon, and I eat variety of meats.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep. And what's your eating schedule like? Are you 3 meals a day, a couple meals a day?
Yeah, I mean, when I'm in a bad dump, I will lose my appetite, and sometimes I have to even make myself eat. But most days I do 2 meals. I do eggs, like eggs, cheese, and bacon for breakfast with whole milk. And then at my lunchtime, I eat, and I usually eat a later breakfast. So today I ate like 10, sometimes even 11. And then I'll do a second meal later in the day. And I'll always do quite a bit of whole milk. Actually, with that one, I do about 32 ounces of whole milk. And then I do like veal. I love veal sausages or burgers. We do a lot of burgers, or I'll do like a big egg and ground beef soup, like in broth, like that I make from water out of cooking the meat and stuff. And let's see, I actually eat a ton of burgers and some dairy. I do a little bit of cheese on stuff. So yeah, I do about 2 meals a day.
Okay.
My appetite fluctuates. I would say I'm 3 years and almost 3 months in. And some days I get really hungry and other days I don't get really hungry, just depends.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not lion diet. I've never even done lion diet. And I'm not opposed to doing that, but I feel like I like the nutrients I get from whole milk with oxalate dumping. And until I feel like I'm through a lot of that heavy stuff, I'm going to continue to do milk and dairy.
Sure. And are you doing raw whole milk or?
I wish I was doing raw whole milk. I have definitely done raw whole milk.
Yeah.
Back in Virginia, we got it from an Amish farm. Out here, it's pretty expensive, and I just feel like it's not as convenient right now. So eventually I'd like to get back on raw milk, but right now I just do whole milk. I do get it though. There's this place that I go to where they have a ranch and they do all their own meats and everything. And it is pasteurized, but it comes from their cows, and I really like their milk. So I will get their stuff. Yeah. Okay. But I'm just regular whole milk is what I'm doing right now. Kind of boring.
It works.
It works.
So if you had to put thinking back to where you were at your least healthy place.
Yeah.
So what you can imagine, it would feel like if you were really solid. How far along the path in percentage wise do you feel like you are? Do you feel like you're 50% recovered? Do you have a sense, or it's just too?
I feel like I'm probably 60% there. Okay. I feel like I will be there when I get through the actual physical dumping symptom. Like when I get through the dumping, I feel like I will be in a very good spot with my health. And I feel like my biggest nag at this point still is oxalate dumping. It's not Lyme symptoms. It's not like chronically being sick and stuff like that. It's just the day in and day out of my body moving oxalate out. But thankfully, it is a lot calmer, and I'm able to work full time and do things like that. And, I still get periods sometimes, like if I'm on my period or things like that. where the dumping will kick up some and it gets a little more intense, but it doesn't last nearly as long. And it's definitely more cyclical than it used to be. So I am seeing those things improve. And that is a very good sign that like I'm moving in the right direction. But I see myself probably oxalate dumping regularly for the next, I don't know. I'm thinking, I don't know. I'm like, I could see maybe things really tapering off at like year 5. Just with where I'm at now, if I don't do anything dumb, you know, start like chiropractic again or anything right now, I think I'm going to have to wait a while to do that stuff.
Sure.
That's just
as somebody who's into hair care and that kind of stuff. No, where I want to go is I'm curious if you've noticed changes in your skin quality.
I think I'm so much prettier than I ever was when I was smoking and eating junk food and puffy and inflamed. Yeah. And yeah, I do. I still color my hair because I like it blonde. So I still do highlights and stuff. But I go to an Aveda salon and I do feel like my skin looks better. I look less puffy. I even do a little bit of tanning bed just because I can't always get out and sit in the sun. So I like to keep my vitamin D up and some color. So I do that like twice a week. My hair got really bad the first couple of years of Carnivore. I mean, it was really falling out. And I think that was all the oxalate. Oh, sorry.
Yep.
Sorry. I think that was all the oxalate dumping. And I lost a ton of weight that first couple months. But I do feel like my hair is falling out less now. It grows pretty quickly. And like I said, I had a sunspot fall off my cheek here. So that's good. And yes, I feel like I look younger. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah.
Baby steps,
So,
baby steps.
I think we're pretty close to being done here. Are there any last things you want to add and or words of advice to people who may be new to carnivore, new to oxalates, new to what's possible in healing?
I think it's really, I wish I would have known about oxalate before I had ever heard of carnivore. And I know that the carnivore community probably doesn't want to focus on that because so many people do really well on carnivore diet.
Yeah.
But I think there are a lot of people suffering from oxalate, and it is a topic that I wish I would have known more about going into carnivore. I would have probably done things differently. I feel like I kind of got thrown into it, and because of what was happening, it threw me into the oxalate topic. So I kind of went like the opposite way that you probably should have. But I think that if somebody is severely dumping, it is probably best not to go 100% carnivore. I think that I've learned that the healing process doesn't happen overnight. Sometimes it does for people, but I think there's a lot of us that it doesn't. And I think just having the mental stamina to push through, as obviously long as you're not putting yourself in danger. And I've learned to just listen to my body. Like I miss having a drink every once in a while, but it doesn't make me feel good, you know? So I really learned to like, okay, this is where my body's at right now, but I won't always be here. So I'm trying to be patient, trying to grow and trust the process and listen to myself. And so I think carnivore is great. I think if you have a major oxalate problem, it is probably best to go slow and to wean yourself off of oxalate and to see how you're doing. But I do think that the body is really strong, and I think it's capable of healing if you're patient with it and you give it what it needs. And I think it's just an individual journey that everybody kind of has to play with and see where they fall, you know?
Yeah.
So, I don't know, just stuff I've learned in my own experience. So.
Yeah, I would agree with everything you said. I went carnivore without knowing about oxalates, and then the YouTube algorithm found me a month later.
It does that.
I think that's when I found my first video with Sally K. Norton. And then for me, that filled in these pieces in my health history that never made sense. Because when I was in my early 20s, my health fell apart. And I didn't know what was going on. And when I was always speculating, but never quite figured it out. And then when I learned about oxalates, it's like, oh my God. Because when I was trying to be vegetarian back then, I was eating everything that was, I was a fiend for nut butters and whole grain
Lord.
bread.
Who doesn't
And
love peanut butter?
I
Who doesn't
know.
love peanut butter? I mean,
Well,
honestly, with
I
apples,
already loved peanut butter, but then when it was like, yeah, I could go to the food co-op and fill up my container with almond butter and cashew butter. Oh my
heaven.
God. That was, I thought I was in heaven, but then my whole body just like disintegrated. So anyway,
It
yeah,
does.
yeah.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean, did you, so
okay.
I was just gonna say that the oxalate component filled a lot in for me too. And all of a sudden, and you know, I have binge watched Sally's videos, and every time I'm like, oh, I had chronic yeast infections in high school. Like that meant I already had an
Yeah,
toxicity problem in high school. And, you know, and so as I'm experiencing these dumping symptoms, but then I'm like binging her information, like stuff did start to connect for me too. Like, I don't think I just had Lyme. I think I had a major oxalate problem. So yeah, it's been huge. I wish more people knew about that. So that's what we're trying to do, right?
yeah, get the word out there.
Yep.
You bet.
So
let's talk about emotional aspects of oxalates and oxalate dumping.
Okay, yes. So I will share a little bit. So I never dealt with severe anxiety. I maybe a little social anxiety, but nothing medicated or anything. I never dealt with severe depression or anxiety, but I always had a very flat mood. I feel like, you know, just never very excited about anything, just always kind of blah. And so I started on Carnivore, and I remember because of the dumping, I feel like I definitely have noticed from my moving into like 2.5 years into my 4th year, which I'm now in my 4th year. I've noticed I've had a lot more moments of like euphoria where I really feel motivated and excited about life. And I would say that a lot of my life, I never really had that, but I was not depressed either. And I wasn't anxious. I didn't have severe anxiety or anything. But I noticed that about 2.5 years on Carnivore and oxalate dumping regularly, that I did start to have some anxiety and depression episodes and weird thoughts, like stuff like I've never, I don't even, it feels a little weird to talk about. Like I've never been suicidal or anything, but just like weird thoughts would like come into my head, and I just feel like depressed. And then I'll get, sometimes when I can tell a dump is going on, because I'll start to get like intense anxiety in my chest. And then my dumping symptoms will really start to pick up. And that tends to be with a more severe dump, because I'm still clearing every day, but I don't get anxiety every day. So anyways, so I will say, but then I'm also seeing those periods of time where I'm feeling really good about things. And I'm like, oh, I'm motivated. I'm excited about things. Like I feel that, and I'm having more of that. But I remember the first time I had that feeling, a lot of people talk about, oh, I went Carnivore and I started having euphoria and just like feeling the best I had ever felt. And I didn't necessarily feel that way because I was oxalate dumping. But I remember there was a few months in, a point where I had like this euphoric feeling, all of which kind of, you know, also went away with oxalate dumping. But I'm noticing more of that now. But I've also noticed that it feels almost like a deeper dumping, if I can say that. Like as I'm moving into my 4th year, the stuff that's being cleared out is like deeper in my body and older. So almost like it's kind of moving older oxalate storage, and it has kicked up some anxiety and depression. Today I was feeling that because I started my period this week, and sometimes I'll have really bad dumping on a period and sometimes I will not. And this time I definitely did. Day 3, it started. And yesterday I had some anxiety because I could feel the dump coming on. And then today I just felt kind of depressed in my mood, actually. It's lifted now, but it was for a couple of hours. I just felt kind of like weird. I don't know. It's hard. Like you kind of feel weird in your skin and stuff. But I know that it's not who I am as a person. It's never been a symptom of anything I had with Lyme. It was never a symptom that I had before Lyme. I know it's just that irritant of that oxalate coming out of my brain and coming out of and irritating my nervous system. And Susan Owens talks about depression and anxiety in her group Triangle Oxalate also. And you can read people talk about how the dumping really kicks up depression and anxiety because it just irritates stuff so much.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
I know that very well myself. Um,
ugh.
and
It's the
I,
worst feeling, isn't it?
it is, and I'll sometimes describe it as body anxiety,
Yes.
because sometimes in me it seems like it's often the right upper quadrant of my abdomen, which, organ wise can be liver, gallbladder, transverse colon. Um, anyway, but for some reason I'll like feel some kind of pressure in that area that, is there when the anxiety is there. And then sometimes that pressure goes away and the anxiety goes away. So it's like, no idea what exactly is happening, but it's weird because it's not like anything in my, with my partner or with
No,
anything else that's got me worried.
no. I see it really, the oxalate dumping symptoms it was helpful dealing with a lot of the herxing stuff from Lyme, because I would get anxiety when I would herx from Lyme disease. When I was going through a really bad detox period, I would get really bad anxiety that would kind of flare up on me. And so I've always been able to sometimes people will say, well, how do you know you don't have Lyme disease? Or how do you know this isn't this kind of thing? I'm like, because I know what my body does when I detox. I know what symptoms I had. I know what I didn't have before I got sick. And I know what happened when I cut this thing out, or I added this thing in and it treats Lyme. So I was always able to kind of detect between a symptom versus a detox type of symptom. And I just know the difference. I know what's detox versus what's like an ailment or something else. And anxiety has always been a detox symptom for me versus something I dealt with regularly. I never had severe anxiety.
Yeah. Yep. That makes sense.
Isn't it like, it amazes me to think about the fact that the body was able to like keep so much intact for so long. And then it's just like, I never had anxiety, even though I had all that oxalate buildup till it started coming out. Like that stuff is just so fascinating to me.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah, is it just because it's coming out faster or something else? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's hard to know.
Yeah.
So with your feelings of euphoria, can you say anything more about those? Like just as an example, I think we may have chatted about this, but I started noticing this summer that if someone did something, just a simple, like nice kindness thing, it just felt like it got into my heart in a deeper level. And so I've been calling them pings of joy.
I love
But
that.
someone will just send me like an emoji, even that simple, and I'll like tear up, and I tear up very easily anyway, but it's like it's on a different order of magnitude now, where it's just like I'm seeing more potentials for kindness and possibilities, as opposed to like writing things off, because it's like, I can be really jaded at times. It's like my jadedness is softening.
Yeah. I was always a very, like there was some emotional trauma that we grew up with in my personal home. I have great parents, but my mom had a lot of stuff that was unresolved, and she took a lot of that out on us when we were little. My mom worked for the Washington Post and had a career, and then had us. And I think she raised us, but my dad wanted her to be home. And I think she wanted to work, and also just stuff from growing up, just had stuff. So there was some like emotional instability that we dealt with quite a lot as kids. So I was always kind of a tough kid, and I just have never been an overly emotional person. I'm not overly sympathetic. I'm like, you know what? Life's hard. Get it together. Do what you got to do. And I honestly, looking back now, I think some of that was oxalate toxicity. And I know this is going to sound really weird, and I'm not saying that trauma doesn't exist and that we're not traumatized, but I have noticed that since I started oxalate dumping, I feel like I'm less reactive. Unless I'm in a bad dump, sometimes I can be reactive if I'm dumping really bad. It's like I just get stimulated and irritated really fast. But if I'm not dumping, I'm much more calm. And I found that like I'm much more, like my heart seems to have been also softer about things. Like things make me emotional that didn't used to make me emotional. And when I feel like the euphoria, I feel excited about life, excited about potential. I feel motivated to do well. And I've also noticed that I have less like social anxiety. Like I'm less afraid necessarily to stand up for myself, or, you know, like if I have to go into, which we do a lot of stuff with real estate agents because I work in title and escrow. So our team closes real estate transactions. So when we have to go market with, you know, high-end real estate agents and things like that, I feel like I'm like less nervous about that stuff than I used to be, you know? So those are some things I've noticed, just less reactive, more tender-hearted towards things and people and circumstances, and more motivated and excited about the future, where I just felt like I was always kind of numb before.
That's beautiful.
In little pieces, maybe not even 100% where I want to be, but I'm seeing those changes slowly over time.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
Yep.
Cool.
So, very cool.
Yeah. Anything else in the emotional spectrum you want to throw in, or we'll just finish it up?
So. Yeah, that's probably it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Thanks for interviewing me.
Oh, well, thank you. It's just been
Hopefully
delightful.
that comes out okay.
Oh, no, it's doing good. Well, so thanks everybody. I'm going to say goodbye, and then, so thanks for tuning in.
Thank you, Michael.